Well, we're back, and before we get into discussing some of the groundbreaking women that we have had in our incredibly colorful past in this part of the country, we have a program note we'd like to bring to your attention. We're going to roll that right now.
She was a brilliant scientist, and she's the only person to earn 2 Nobel Prizes in different fields. But Marie Curie was nearly ruined by an affair with a married man. It's the story of the pioneer of radioactivity research who paid the ultimate price for her discoveries. One of the greatest sagas in the history of science, the genius of Marie Curie.
Friday night at 8 on RSU Public TV.
You know, groundbreaking efforts on the part of many Tulsa women have made a big difference in this part of the world. Our guest today, Maggie Brown, with the Tulsa Historical Society. She has more on this. It's good to see you.
I'm very glad to be here.
How long have you been with the Historical Society?
I've been there for 8 years.
Really? Are you from here originally?
I'm not. I'm from Kansas.
I guess you've got to consider this experience an eye-opener, haven't you?
Definitely.
It's surprising to me, and I've lived here well over 30 years. It seems like every week I discover some contribution made by a woman that's not acknowledged except through the Historical Society.
Well, Tulsa has an amazing history, of course, full of men and women, and we do our best to tell as many of those stories as possible.
You're director of exhibits,
Yes.
Are you not? Tell us a little bit about that, because quite frankly, I don't know if folks even know where you're located.
And we are located in Tulsa on Peoria Avenue, 25th and Peoria, which is just south of Woodward Park in the Tulsa Garden Center. And we've been there for about 10 years now. We opened in that building about 10 years ago. We actually have 8 exhibit galleries, and they each change on a regular basis. So there's always something new to see and a new piece of Tulsa history to learn about. People can come every month and see a new exhibit.
So it changes every month.
It does.
You and I were chatting just before we started to tape today about the contributions made by women in this neck of the woods. We've had musicians. We've had, of course, the 5 ballerinas. We have had doctors, architects. We have had women who've worked quietly but tirelessly behind the scenes to improve and raise the standard of living in this part of the country. Are you satisfied that you've uncovered all of them?
We could never possibly uncover all of the stories in Tulsa's history, but we do our best to uncover more and more all the time.
Well, we have some pictures that you supplied us with very graciously, and I want to tell you at the onset we're very grateful to you for doing that. And I'm going to ask you, as we put these pictures up, to identify them and tell us a little bit about the woman we're seeing and why she deserves our attention, okay?
All right.
Let's take a look at the first one.
All right, so this is Jane Hurd Clinton, and she moved to Tulsa just before 1900 with her husband, Dr. Fred Clinton, who helped discover the first oil well in the Tulsa area. Jane was from the South, and she grew up with all sorts of cultural opportunities, art, music, books. And when she moved to Tulsa, there was none of that. It was really a cow town, mostly full of men, and very few opportunities for women. And what she did is she met friends, and they together worked to establish some of the great cultural institutions in early Tulsa, many of which are still around. Several of the organizations she helped establish before statehood still exist. One of those is called Hyichka. Hyichka is the Creek word for music, and so that was a music organization that was established back in 1904 and still exists today. In fact, Hyichka hosts concerts at the Historical Society once a month. So she did some really amazing things in Tulsa and was actually described as being a pioneer in building the soul of the city. That's how people described her.
No kidding. All right, let's take a look at the next one.
All right, this is Lila Lindsay, and she actually came to Tulsa a little bit earlier than Mrs. Clinton, who we just talked about. Lila actually was born in Indian Territory and is Creek. Her biggest dream as a young girl was to go to school, and she wasn't allowed to begin school until she was 12, but once she got there, she excelled in school and went to college. May have been the first Creek woman to graduate from college in the 1880s. And then she returned to Indian Territory and shortly afterwards to Tulsa and became a teacher. She taught in the first mission school in Tulsa that opened in 1886. And as soon as she was married and was no longer allowed to be a teacher, then she put her efforts into education in other ways, supporting the local education system, supporting churches. She was involved in the founding of the Women's Christian Temperance Union in Tulsa. And she also ran for public office and was appointed to lots of committees, commissions by different politicians. So she was described as being a leader in practically all women's organizations of any note in Tulsa. And she was described that way by a historian who wrote one of the first histories of Tulsa. He's the one who described her that way.
Is there any kind of a booklet that one could buy to sort of, you know, at their leisure, sit back and learn more about these women?
There are certainly a number of books about Tulsa history, and they would each include some of these women, but not all of them. They're probably not all together in one book. That'd be a great idea.
Take a look at another one.
All right, so this is Fannie Mish, and Fannie is originally from Iowa and then Kansas, and she wants to be a teacher. So she gets her degree and she heads off to the wilderness of Texas, where the teachers ride around on horseback in rural areas. She ends up in Tulsa a few years later when she marries her husband, and they found a printing company. She immediately fell in love with the history of Tulsa and the Creek Nation. And she spent her time collecting that history, collecting important documents. She actually spent a considerable amount of time researching Lila Lindsay, who we just talked about. And when Lila Lindsay died, Fannie Mish bought her collection of personal papers and worked on writing a book about her and also a history of the Creek Nation. So she was really a very early historian in Tulsa history, helped found the Tulsa Historical Society early on. And we can really thank her for a lot of the things that remain of the early history of Tulsa.
No kidding. Marvelous contributions she made. And I think we have one more.
One more,
to
yes.
share with the folks at home. And this is who?
And this is Tosca Berger Kramer. She comes along just a few years later. She was originally from New Zealand. She began playing the violin by the age of 4, maybe even earlier. And her parents were traveling musicians. They traveled around the world. And they ended up on a tour of the United States and stopped off in Tulsa to play along with her. And her father got very ill and had to stay in Tulsa to recuperate. And while they were here, the city leaders talked the family into staying in Tulsa. And so the family ended up forming the Tulsa Philharmonic.
No kidding.
And he was the first conductor, and Tosca played in the Philharmonic. And basically, she worked as a professor at different universities teaching music, traveled around the state teaching music lessons, and played all sorts of interesting stringed instruments that were very rare. Her husband, that she eventually married, actually made stringed instruments, so it was a perfect match.
Do you have any of them?
We don't have any of them, although we have had them on display before. And so she's a very interesting person, and we have some of her music in our collection.
You know, the late Carl Albert was a friend of mine, and I was in his home once, and he was laughing about his wife. His wife was from back east, and he said when they married and they were about to board a train, and he reached into his desk and pulled it out to share it with me. They were about to board a train to come to what folks here know as Bug Tussle, Oklahoma. Her father stepped up and handed her a small purse. He said, "Now I want you to take this. You're going into Indian country. It's dangerous." Well, inside the purse was a Derringer and 8 or 10 rounds of ammunition. You know, that was the mentality back then of Oklahoma. That's how people saw the state of Oklahoma. And she told me that it was funny. The minute she stepped off the train, people just threw open their arms and literally embraced the two of them. And she said, "I never brought the gun out again." I never needed it.
Glad she never needed to.
Never needed it. We got about a minute left.
All right.
You say the exhibits change monthly.
Yes.
What are your hours of operation?
We are open Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 4.
Admission price?
$5 for adults, $3 for seniors, and our members and children and students of all ages are free.
What are your hours?
Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 4.
Okay, so plenty of time for folks to come in with youngsters and take a look around. And it's always good to have young girls see who the trailblazers
Yes,
were.
definitely.
Hey, thank you for coming by.
Thanks for having me.
And we appreciate so much your helping educate us to some of the women who blazed the trail, you know, many years ago. We'll do this again down the road.
All right, great.
All right.
Thank you.
Big musical events are coming in to Bartlesville. And Randy Thompson, the executive director of OK Mozart, will have more on that right after this.